The DHS IG is currently being blocked from investigating Butler as well. That's out in the media. That's all well known. Your investigative journalist found that Crooks did indeed have an online persona,
quite an
online footprint,
one.
And he was talking to people. So it's like, why aren't we investigating this? I mean, if
an attempted murder of a presidential
candidate, and then there's another assassination attempt. There's been multiple public breaches of President Trump's security over the last year. And then, Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way, and we're not really even allowed to look into that at all. And Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war. I wasn't particularly close with Charlie. He was very gracious to me when I was running for Congress, very, very supportive. So we knew each other. And the last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing, in the stairway, and I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small, you've been in the West Wing, it's small, it's a tight space, and he said, "Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran," very loudly.
He was single-minded.
And he walked off, and he went, I believe, into the Oval. So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that. It's a data point. It's a data point that we need to look into.
What do you mean when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that this individual, Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe he is. But the investigation that I was a part of, the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI will say that they stopped that because they wanted to turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. And I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying
no, I don't think you are.
Because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages that have been made public, that Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against this war with Iran. And we knew at the end of the 12-day war, at the end of Midnight Hammer, that the Israelis were going to come back and ask us to go back to war again.
Right.
So we have a lot of data points between Butler, the assassination attempts against President Trump, the breaches of his security, what happened to Charlie Kirk.
Can I just ask you to pause on the Charlie Kirk because you mentioned the breaches of the president's security that have been reported. One that was reported, and I can't say whether it's true. I'm only asking to see if you know that it is true. But it's been reported that Prime Minister Netanyahu's security detail was caught twice by Secret Service attaching some kind of device to the president's Secret Service emergency response vehicle. I don't know if that's true. Have you heard that?
I've read it in the media. I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
I think the president and the vice president and several members of the cabinet going out to dinner in D.C. and the Code Pink protesters having a heads up about that to rent the table, and that's hard to do. They had to figure out where they'd rent the table. They had to kind of get the restaurant on board to a certain extent. To me, that's kind of almost like counting coup. It's a soft flex. It's a I can touch you whenever I want. It was Code Pink. They weren't going to do anything. We know they're just going to be kind of crazy and annoying. However, what does that mean? That means you've got real problems with your security detail. And then, a few weeks later, you have an armed police officer who's off duty, who's not part of the president's detail, come right up and shake the president's hand. And the guy's probably patriotic, American, whatever. He probably just wanted to shake the president's hand legitimately. But that got a lot of publicity. And what does that mean? And the president, again, President Trump is very smart. I think President Trump has a gift for interpreting large sets of data.
Yes.
And making very, very key strategic decisions. And so when the president sees that he's got issues with his own security detail, when he sees what happened in Butler with the other assassination attempts, when he sees what happened with Charlie, I think it's reasonable to believe that somewhere in his head he thinks that, maybe I don't have a choice. Maybe they could harm me or they could harm my family. And if they can't keep me safe, I believe the president deeply cares. I believe he's very courageous. I think if it was just a matter of He's worried about his own physical safety. I don't think he cares. We saw that in Butler. But he does love his family, and he's got a big family. And so somewhere in his head, if they can't keep me safe, what about my family?